Taylor, how are you doing?
Pretty good today, Parker. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. So tell me a little bit more about you. Where are you from? What do you do now? And how did you get into that?
We're located in Richmond, Virginia. We're in the reclaimed and antique lumber business. My father started the company almost 55 years ago, 1969, and fell into it by accident. And just over the years, it's slowly grown into one of the largest reclaimed lumber recycling facilities in the US. We occupy over 5 acres indoors, sitting on a 30-acre facility, and provide a number of products from flooring, paneling, reclaimed lumber, mantles, beams, moldings. We do a lot of specialized and historical restoration, recreation, working on, like here in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, George Washington's Mount Vernon. We did there. Mount Vernon's currently undergoing a large renovation on the portico overlooking the Potomac, and one of our last large projects is the Maryland State Capitol. It's the oldest wooden dome structure capitol in the U.S. Under continuous use. And we supplied old growth cypress shingles, 2 width, 2 spec, 2 grade, matching the 200-year-old originals that were on the facility.
So for the business, did you always imagine this as being a family business when you first really got into it and took it very seriously? Or how did you first really decide that this is something that you wanted to pursue?
I just fell into it being a family business, literally summers and stuff spent working in the mill and making some extra money and that sort of thing. Over the years, when I was in college, also, we built a steeplechase track out in New Kent County where the horses go around and jump they're called national fences. And that worked out on the farm for 2 or 3 years in between college classes and that sort of thing. And then after I finished college, I was still out there a little bit, but we also started in the demolition, to where I was just met my wife, newly married, and had some time to go off and head up the acquisition part of the business, to where we go and take down large textile mills all up and down the East Coast. A year from Boston, we had an apartment in Pawtucket, Rhode Island for 10 years. And from Pawtucket, Boston's an hour and a half ride, depending on traffic, and an hour and a half circle. There's a lot of old stone mills, brick mills. You go into Fall River, all the old mill towns. It's the Northeast is full of them. And the first couple of jobs, we worked out of hotels and stuff. But once we settled into the Northeast, so we kept an apartment for 10 years up there. And that allowed me on the acquisition end, gave me an appreciation of what we're doing and why we do it. And quite honestly, it's fun to jump into large equipment and knock something down and that sort of thing. And a little bit of a danger aspect. We're young and crazy. And one time we blew up a gigantic smokestack in downtown Providence with 56 sticks of dynamite. That was a fun day. And a lot of unique experiences and different things in the business, but it also gives us the insight, like when we're looking for old structures to reclaim and pull the wood out, we have an insight that most of the people don't, to where I've personally sent back 100 to 1,000 tractor trailer loads reclaimed material from primarily the Northeast, sending it all back here to Richmond.
So for the acquisition side, how has that changed from the 70s and the 80s till today? I imagine it was in person, it was referrals, but now a lot of it is online for you, right?
Yeah, the internet was a game. Two or three things changed. The first big one, back in the early days, in order to get into this business, you actually had to set up a sawmill. So the acquisition costs to go into business were tenfold higher than what they are today. Today, we have a lot of specialized machinery that's honestly fairly cheap. Round numbers, even a used sawmill might cost two or three hundred thousand dollars to set up today. Whereas with today's modern equipment for 30 or 40,000, you can go buy some used, these small micro band saws, a lot of technology, but they're cheap. So the bar into the business. So that was the first thing is once, and we call it the wood miser. Once that machine and a subsequent line of machines that's copied them came about, now all of a sudden, a lot of people could get into the business with a very low input cost and hang their sign out front, go into competition. It was still hard to get the word out. So everybody tended to be local, except for the larger, more established ones that through good old fashioned word of mouth, the local guys tended to stay hyper local until the internet. Once the internet hit, and prior to the internet, everything was yellow pages and periodicals, magazines, that sort of thing. Trade shows were big because that was one of the few places to where homeowners could go and see 50 or 100, 300 companies all at one time. But nowadays, with the internet, everybody on their telephone can find virtually everything that they want. And for us, we were late coming into the game. We've always had an internet presence. The reality is, over our company's history for the first 25 years, we virtually did very little advertising at all. Everything was word of mouth and good old fashioned business and referral. And then when the crunch hit in '07, '08, we had a website. Our website at that point, we just redesigned, but it still wasn't much of one. It was one tier up from our first website, which again, it was very little. It was based off of scans from a publication that we wrote, a brochure back in the mid 80s. And they just purposed it and it looked okay. And most of what we do and what we sell is timeless. But once at that point, 50% of our business was to smaller heart pine companies, because by this point, we moved into the facility that we have now. We have been collecting and increasing our inventory for 25, 30 years. And when we started doing these large demolition jobs, we would sell to our smaller competitors. It also kept us light. We didn't have a big ad budget. We didn't have large sales teams. These smaller companies, we were able to process the excess capacity where they were getting the sales and didn't have the capacity or the facility or the material to produce it. And that worked great for us until the big bust hit, because half of our business was based on that model. When the bust hit, got reduced by 50%. Now, we were fortunate we didn't have any debt, so we were able to weather the storm. But I had a lot of days sitting at the computer, and we had DSL, real high speed. It was a step up from the dial up, though. Phone isn't ringing, nobody's coming in. I'm looking at Google and I'm starting to read books, and it's how do I get my website? Because I used to rank a little bit better, be on the first page, and now I'm not anymore. Why is that? Because AT put our first website together. They charged us $800 a month to do it. And this was back in 98, 99, 2000. And so for the first 4 or 5 years, we didn't get much traffic off of it because the web was new then. But '07, '08, I'm starting to work on the website. And then I also see these Google ads on the right-hand side. And it's, if I can't get my website, how do I get here? And went down the rabbit hole. Perry Marshall was recommended, and I found him and got hooked into his email drip campaigns, and it was all interesting. Bought the book, read the book, implemented the stuff in the book, and wow, it worked. And I've been in his group for 15 years now. And through Perry, Dennis he was a guest speaker in one of the seminars. The first big one that I signed up for, that was the COVID year. And then the subsequent year, I ended up joining his community. But those communities, the internet is a very integral part, because that drives, I'd say, probably 50% of our sales today. And we sell all up and down the East Coast. I tell people the internet's great at finding them, but ethical and solid business is what keeps them. And some of the older people I talk to, I equate today's internet to the country store. If you ever had opportunity to go to into a country store, a lot of old timers in there just talking about community happenings and that sort of thing. And you could go in and it was like the local news, and you learn about everybody and everything. And the internet's kind of turned all that in on steroids to where good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, it gives you it's going to amplify whatever you're putting out. So if you have a good, strong message, good business ethics, work ethics, it's going to amplify that.
Now, though that you own a fairly large business at this point, and we do work with a lot of more home services type people as well. And one of the biggest complaints that we often hear is they're just pitched all the time by digital marketing companies through their email, through other means. So you mentioned before Perry Marshall and working with Dennis Yu at Blitzmetrics. What do you think is the main reason why you decided to go with people like Perry Marshall and like us instead of anyone else? And why do you think this is something other people in the digital marketing space can learn? So in other words, what's the main difference in terms of value that you think people like us and everyone else is giving that other people aren't?
I would say, you know, you practice what you preach. Everything that I was just saying, I found within both groups. One of the things that I personally excel at is being able to identify whether it's people, equipment, things that excel, call it a vision. I'm able to look at things outside of the box and figure out, hey, this is going to work. This is not going to work. And like with Perry Marshall, right out of the bat, everything that you follow worked. And it worked exactly like they said. It's just that positive reinforcement. Every time you do something that works, and not only did it work, you're able to, you see it into the sales. And honestly, for the first 7 or 8 years, I was green. I didn't know anything. I was learning, and it worked, and we could see a difference, but I was scared because I wasn't good at tracking. I did enough stuff. I knew what worked. I knew that it was working, but I couldn't put my finger on the button and say why or how much because the tracking just wasn't in place. I didn't understand it quite enough. And it was for me coming in, it was all brand new. And my entire education was basically through those two people, starting with Perry. And I had a couple of other people through Perry in his group where I was taking classes and just kept learning. And for the past 2 or 3 years now, I've been in Dennis's group, and I need to turn my telephone off. And Dennis is the same thing. A lot of things that I see similarities between the two is values. Everybody's ethical. That, as we say, they're doing it the right way, not taking shortcuts. They're also both brutally honest. I'm not scared to ask a question in either one of them, but you don't always get the warm, fuzzy answer you're looking for. And I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I'm going to say that money's important to everybody, but it's not the driving factor. Their true desires for both are to help people first and then make a buck along the way and have that money be a greater good, greater cause than just that one transaction. And it's in both, the mindset is more of a teach a man to fish and give him a fish. And for me, it's been very much that because it started down a journey. And I will say I've been about 6 years now to where I just pushed all my chips in, reading everything, and all the seminars, learning. We completely redid our website, started doing SEMrush, started really getting serious about SEO, really serious about paid advertising and increasing the spends. And it worked up until I'd say by teen, I was asking people, how do I slow the ads down? Because it worked to the point we're a manufacturer first. I got good. I got to the point to where I could out market our ability to produce. And I had to start slowing down the leads and for now, I'm at the point to where it's all about balance. You get too many leads, too much business. You can't get through everybody. basically you're paying people to come in. You can't get to them. They leave unhappy. So I'm spending money to make people upset. So now my trick is to find the balance and between manufacturing capacity and leads and sales and fitting it all together. And I actually have some smaller companies and stuff that I'll help with. And I tell them it's if you really want to take your business in a direction, it truly is as simple as creating a web page. You create a web page with the service or product that you want to promote, and the offer out there. People are going to see it and start asking about it. And the approaches that I've learned, it truly is game changing to where you can make it exactly what you want to be. And it really is that simple. It almost sounds too good to be true sometimes, but it is. You create the page, push the product or service, create the SEO, then you start bringing in the ad funnels and different things. And it's amazing. And I'll tell you, every week with Dennis, some of the things I learned, it's like now I've been with Customers AI for 6 months or so. I was just looking at it the other day because I had a small photographer friend I was helping out, and he has been getting some bad advice. But I showed him my Customers AI and explained it to him, and I'm sending, I don't know, 3,000 emails a month. I got a 65% open rate. These people didn't give me their name or their email. Program figured it out, shot them an email. I got a 65% open rate on people that I don't even know their name. It's creepy and cool. He's Dennis tends to stay on the bleeding edge of technology, and we're exposed to some things light years ahead of everything else with AI. I'm still a neophyte with AI, but at the same time, I got the Chat GPT-4, and I'll show people now I can talk to it. We can have conversation. It's you have a question, I just talk to my phone, and people are just mesmerized. I say, yeah, it's absolutely nuts. But I watch what other people are doing with it, and I'm just like, I just feel inadequate because what they're doing with it's just absolutely incredible. I'm still using it for copy and different things. And from working on a particular page or something like that, yeah, you can dump in all the keywords and it will do a really good job of giving me options and writing things that I would have never come up with. I tell people when I first got into chat, one of the first cool lines, I'm writing Google ads, and it said the floor is the soul of the home. Damn, that's good. That's real good. That's deep. I'd have never come up with that. And that's when I realized, man, this thing's a game changer. Now it's come up with some real garbage too. And you can't put all your eggs into it. You got to still read through, but it comes up with some amazing copy sometimes. That's just absolutely incredible.
So, I guess one of the last questions I have for you today is that if you had to give advice to yourself, whether it's in the business fronts or the acquisition digital marketing front from 10 years ago, because I know a lot of home service people, a lot of people that are into manufacturing are going to be watching this and reading it on the blog. So if you had to give any advice to them or yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
I would have learned, I wished I learned tracking a lot earlier than I did, because when I went through some of those classes and really went on all in and decided everybody keeps telling me, know every dollar that you spend. I wished I understood tracking because that gives you the ability to dissect your ad spend. So if I spend money with somebody, I know for a fact the return, what the return is and the percentage of the return. Sometimes I'll be honest, like customers, I gave it 2 or 3 months. It's $500 a month. I'm like, okay, I'm 2 grand into this. I have only gotten a couple of phone calls. Let's keep it going. Everybody seems to be in it. Then it's like the algorithm, it started to figure it out. I'm watching the open rates go up. I'm watching engagement on the website where it's redirecting the people back into it. And it's a solid part of it now. It's Dennis has mentioned that it's one of his favorite retargeting tools. And I almost canned it a couple of times, but I had the tracking in place and to where you could trust that it's slowly moving in the right direction. And then it was like one day it just opened up and just really took off. prior to that, I was skeptical to really to scale where I needed to scale because I was scared to because I didn't understand it. And with the tracking, that brings an understanding of who your customer is, how they're finding you, and if you are spending money to bring them there, is it working? And are you getting a return on it? And from the business side, that was able to pull everything together, like I was saying, to for the first time about 4.5, 5 years ago, I effectively out marketed our ability to produce. And it's okay at that point. And I was pedal to the metal too. And it took me about 2.5 years once I pushed all my chips in and said, okay, I'll learn everything I can about this. And 2.5 years later, we, and for the first time ever in 45 years, 40 years of the company's history, that we all of a sudden had more than we can handle. We've always been able to handle everything that was thrown at us. And now for the first time, we had a tool and things in place that really changed all that.
Great. Thank you so much for talking for me. Where can people go and find you online for your website?
Our website's etmore.com, ORE.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for our park.